Welcome to the brand called You, where we converse with the future. The brand today is Rajiv Laroia. Rajiv is a undergrad from IIT Delhi. He has a PhD from University of Maryland, and after working for prestigious places like AT&T Bell Labs, he set up his first company as the founder CTO called Flarion, which was acquired by Qualcomm for $800 million. After spending 5 years with Qualcomm and doing another stint at Sonos Networks, he started his second venture, which is the company called Light, both of which we'll talk about today. Welcome to our show, Rajiv.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, let's start with your first part of journey at Bell Labs. Some people would say Bell Labs was what Google research, Facebook research, and Amazon and Microsoft research all put together is. It was some very famous people who had invented things like the transistor. How was it working at Bell Labs?
So it was actually very nice. So when I joined Bell Labs in 1992, things had changed, but I joined the Mathematical Sciences Research Center, which was still very theoretical, and some of the world's leading mathematicians were there. And so I got to learn for 8 years. I got to learn a lot. I still remember when I interviewed over there and I was walking the corridors and looking at the names on the left and the right and said, these are the people that wrote the books on everything that I read. So they're making a mistake. They're not going to hire me, is what I thought. And I also remember the very first day of my very first day at Bell Labs when I had a conversation with my boss there, and he was explaining my duties and stuff. And he said, unless you disappear for more than 4 weeks and we worry, you can work from anywhere in the world. You don't need to tell us where you are. And all we ask is at the end of 1 year, you fill out a one-page form, which was informally known as I am great. And he says, your job is to go get famous.
The job is to go get famous.
That's what he told me the first day. I said, I have no idea how to accomplish that. If you give me a task, at least I know how to do it. But I have no idea how to go about doing this.
Well, you did it, whether it was at Bell Labs or subsequently, you have become famous. Now, I know a little bit about your journey. When you founded Flarion, and which was subsequently acquired for a huge amount by Qualcomm, I've heard variously that is what 4G is. What is the technology that you built, and why was it so valuable for Qualcomm to get it?
So this was early 2000s that I started. In fact, in 2000, early in the year 2000, I started the company. If you step back in time and imagine the world over there, everybody was talking about 3G wireless actually at that point in time, because we'd just seen a whole revolution with 2G voice wireless. And wireless technology was considered very important. There was lots of PhDs graduating with communication degrees out of a lot of universities and they were all trying to solve the wireless problem. Now, one of the problems that I noticed being at Bell Labs and looking at the landscape and the proposed standards for 3G was that these were standards being proposed by people who had only ever done voice communication and didn't really understand the data part of the communication. Mm-hmm. It's like if you ask a telephone company what the data should be, their answer was ISDN, which was very different than the internet. Mm-hmm. Believe it or not, that in the year 2000, the then 3G standards did not even mention the word internet even once. And they were supposed to be the data standard for. So it was clear to me, looking at the standard, is that they were sort of not focusing on the right things and they didn't understand what needed to be done. What needed to be done for voice was fundamentally different than what needed to be done for data. And 3G, so to speak, at that point, was going to be all about wireless data. So I noticed that
3G is going to be about wireless data
was
eventually.
going to be at that time. Mm-hmm. Of course, subsequent to that, there was great inflation, and what we thought 3G became actually 4G, because people introduced all sorts of other variants that they started calling 2.5G and 3G in the meantime, because 3G obviously got delayed because the technology was not ready. And so the technology we developed was to fix this problem. Mm-hmm. So I actually first started that inside of Bell Labs. Mm-hmm. It's just that we were not standard. We were not playing in the standards battles that were being fought for wireless technologies at that point in time. So Lucent decided that they were not going to back anything that wasn't an international standard. So I decided to basically take it outside and spun a company outside of Lucent. And we developed this technology for 5 years. We did trials with the operator. It was an uphill task because first, the entire world was against us. All the players that had power and money, we were trying to undermine what they were doing in a sense. So they were all against us. And operators were simply not used to deploying stuff that was not standard. Standards meant scale, standards meant cost reduction, a whole lot of other things that they'd experienced. And we were a non-standard technology. But it turned out that we were so much better than the standards that they could not, at the end, ignore us. And the operators then therefore decided that they were not going to settle for inferior technology, but they were going to take our technology and they were going to help us push it in the standards. Because we, on our own, could never have done anything like that. So thanks to the support from operators here, Nextel at that time, which was an independent operator in the US, and T-Mobile and Vodafone in Europe, they basically pushed our technology into the emerging 4G standard.
Got it.
Right. So, and that's how we ended up owning all of the essential intellectual property in basically the LTE 4G standard. This standard was fundamentally different than voice standards. There was also a wholesale technology shift. The voice 2G standards were based on a technology called CDMA. And we determined that for data, the best technology was going to be based on something called OFDMA, or orthogonal frequency division, multiple access. And now the LTE standard is based on that. So it was a shift from CDMA, which nobody believes would actually happen.
What does that mean? You're now going above my head. So what does that mean? Does it mean it's much more capacity for carrying data, or was it able to, what was the benefit of moving from CDMA to this new standard?
So there's many benefits. Capacity is a benefit. It's a significant benefit. But most people involved in technology at that period of time saw technology as saw capacity as the only benefit. And this is where they didn't entirely get the whole story. It turns out that in a data system, as opposed to a voice system, which you just set up a call and then all you're doing is talking and the connection is maintained for you, there's a lot of other control activity that the system has to engage in. Data is bursty. You need to, if you're just browsing the web, for instance, for many seconds you would do nothing. You don't want to waste batteries and occupy a channel at that time when you're doing nothing. And all of a sudden you'll hit a key or click on a link and you want instant response. So you need to be able to get into the system quickly, get a whole bunch of data, get out. So in order for the system to operate, it doesn't just require you to have high capacity. It also requires you to have very fine control and very quick responses, which is a huge benefit that OFDM offers over CDMA as well, right? So most people miss this. And the other thing they missed was that wireless technologies so far developed only for voice were not conducive to internet protocols. See, the internet grew up in the wired world, which has very different properties in the wireless world. The wireless is a fundamentally unreliable channel, right? You will make mistakes when you transmit over the air. There's interference, there's corruption of data from all sorts of reasons. You never make errors in the wired infrastructure today. If somebody sends a packet and wasn't received at the other end, that doesn't happen because of errors. That only happens because of congestion. So today, to keep the internet stable, to keep the internet stable, the internet protocols were designed that if they sense congestion, they slow down transmission to help the congestion to keep the internet stable.
Got it.
Now, if you try to run those same protocols over wireless, and there's an error on the wireless channel, you don't receive, and you stop transmitting data because you think there is congestion, because the protocols don't know any other reason why you may not receive something, then they don't behave correctly.
Correct.
Somebody can promise you 1 gigabit per second link, but if there is packet corruption happening over the link, you may not even see a kilobit out of it because the protocol just refuses to transmit data.
Got it.
Right? So you had to design a whole wireless system to work properly with the existing internet protocols. The approach that the then wireless companies took was, well, the internet is going to have to change if they want to go wireless. The approach we took was, well, we're going to change our wireless technology to suit it better to the internet protocols. And that was a big fundamental shift. Yes, we had better capacity by a good margin, but that wasn't really the most important thing about the.
Where does this go? And I know you're no longer in that, but still, 10 years from now, what is the vision here? Do we get to a world where we have tremendous ability to just have a telepresence about us and the data is 100 times where it is? Or what is the limit?
There's some sort of a limit in the sense that there's limited amount of spectrum available to do the communication. Spectrum is like having a wire, if you will, right? So spectrum goes all the way from DC or 60 hertz that you have for your light frequencies all the way to ultraviolet frequencies that are even higher. But the usable part of the spectrum for wireless communication is limited. And so given the limited amount of spectrum, there are a few ways you can still improve capacity, right? One is to put more towers, so reuse the spectrum as often as you can, or put more antennas on each tower, right? And but if you don't want to do that, then obviously there's a limit to how much capacity there is available, and the towers come at some cost. So until it is worth generating more capacity because there's demand and people are willing to pay for it, more towers will go up. Eventually, there will be some kind of limit that would be reached because you don't want to put any more towers because there's no more revenue.
So is there like a Moore's law for communication as well, that your capacity on what we're going to carry in our phones will double, triple, 10 times every year, 2 years?
Yes and no. I mean, in principle, maybe, but it depends on whether the governments or the international community makes more spectrum available. And there's, even if they do, there's still a limited amount of spectrum there. The second is the phone is a device that the largest consumption of data can happen on a video link over the phone, which is limited by the size of the screens you have. So, if you offer a phone a gigabit per second today, it's not clear to me what it will do with it, right? You need high data rates to get information very quickly in response to things you're doing, like click on a link, you don't want to wait for 2 minutes. So a very high data rate means you fill up the screen without having to wait for it. But do you have any mechanism to absorb, consume gigabit per second over your cell phone?
Got it.
I actually don't think that there is a need for an individual cell phone to consume that much data.
Very interesting. We'll talk about your new company, which is Light. It was, I think, it won the best product in photography from Wall Street and some other publications, if I remember correctly. And I've seen the actual prototype, and I know you were carrying your phone, which has some of that product. What does it do? What's revolutionary and new about it?
Well, the idea for the company started because of my own my own problems with carrying all my photography gear everywhere I went, because I have a full frame camera and a bunch of lenses, but I noticed that wherever I went, I had to carry a bag full of equipment just to be able to take pictures. And I always wondered, with so much innovation that's happening, even thanks to cell phone cameras and so forth, that we're taking pretty good pictures, is it really necessary to have cameras that are so big? Or is it possible to squeeze these things into a much smaller volume, perhaps something that could fit in your pocket? And after looking at it and getting some preliminary understanding of how these things work, and then spending some time, I had the luxury of spending 8-9 months sitting at home reading optics. I figured out that it was a solvable problem, that the reason cameras are big is because to make good pictures, you need to collect a lot of light, right? But if you can collect a lot of light from multiple apertures rather than one aperture, then it turns out that you can reduce the volume of the camera significantly and still maintaining or even getting better quality than large cameras.
You want to hold up your camera just
This is not a camera. This is a
the
phone.
right. But this is your technology, right?
Yes, it has 5 cameras
Right.
in the back of a phone, and we
So
also
this
get
can
standalone cameras.
take pictures which are comparable to digital SLR or SLR cameras.
Yes, and the big camera that we it's somewhat bigger than this. It's not a very big camera, but the standalone camera that we built had the ability to zoom from 28 millimeters to 150 millimeters and take 52 megapixel pictures, and it would fit in my pocket. I take it in my pocket with me, and could zoom and take very high resolution pictures. Right, so.
And this is something that SoftBank has now invested in. It's by some metric, I don't know with current stories how that is going, but by some metric, it is a big validation that it's a huge idea, huge technology. How was that experience with interacting with Masa and folks at SoftBank?
It was a very interesting experience. I actually, in the process, learned quite a bit. Said I am more of a technical guy than the business guy, and I always partner with really good business people to do these things. So we interacted. But for me, as a technical person, it was a very good learning experience.
And that's another thing that's very unique about you, Rajiv. You've set up these 2 large companies or really cutting edge companies, but you've always chosen to be the founder's CTO. In the age and day of very famous inventors, like Elon Musk or Bill Gates or Zuckerberg or whoever, who create these large visionary companies, they always want to be the CEOs. Why not you?
Well, there are many reasons. The first one is I recognize where my strengths are, and I also know what I enjoy doing. I really enjoy solving hard technical problems, right? Now, if I was to take on a CEO position, I would certainly be doing a job that can be done better by somebody else. And what I think I do really well, I will not be spending my time doing. So I don't think it's a win-win. It's a lose-lose situation as far as I see it. And the fact that I don't even enjoy doing that role and other people enjoy it and do it much better than me, the right thing for me to do would be to stick to what I enjoy doing. Because part of all of this, especially at this stage of my career, I only do things for enjoyment and fun as well, right? So I don't want to do things that I don't find enjoyable.
That's phenomenal.
I don't need to, so I certainly, as a part of work, I want to have lots of fun solving problems and doing what I love to do.
Right. That's a tremendous amount of self-awareness and maturity. So congratulations on doing that. A lot of people would find that hard to admit, that is what they want to do, and you have shown that time and again. When one reads your profile, and we were scrolling through it, you've won many, many awards and recognitions, including, as we were talking about, the Graham Bell Innovation or Inventor Award by IEEE. Which is phenomenal. So, and your alma mater, both IIT and University of Maryland, have recognized you as an outstanding alumnus and an inventor. Of all these and any other recognition that you have received, which one has been the most dear to you? Which one made you perk up and said, "This is good"?
So, I would like to say first, I was the face for Clarion. I'm the face of the company, but to get an award to prove a technology, there's a whole team that sits behind, and without which none of this would be possible. So even though I'm the lucky one who gets to receive these awards, they're really truly not just mine, but they belong to the whole team that contributed. To me, these awards all, they're good. They're validation, not just for me, but for the team. But the biggest satisfaction I get is when I see people talking over their phones. There are, a few billion 4G phones in the world, and to think that I had something to do with the technology that went into it is in itself, and a very satisfying award for me. Whether I get
pretty much every phone that's on 4G now.
Every phone has the technology in it.
My God, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about that.
So that to me is the biggest award.
Phenomenal. Rajiv, we've had some good times together, and I know you're a fun-loving person. What is the thing that has given you most joy and fun in the last 1 year?
um, that's a difficult one. I'm having so much fun at work. But spending time with the family is equally important. The last few months we've been empty nesters. The last of the kids went to college. It was important to spend time with all the kids, especially the youngest one before he went.
From 4 kids to all gone must be a big change.
It is a big change. But I have to say, I am actually happy with the change. I'm happy that they're in the prime of their life, the best years of their life, and having fun. And it was fun to watch them grow up into really nice young adults. And now it's time for us. It's also a feeling of freedom, right?
But personally, you've talked about you like to fly planes and other things. There must be some event that says, "Oh man, that was a really good day."
I've had bad days flying planes. I crashed one.
I know.
I totaled
your plane.
Helicopter. I was learning to fly.
That must be
And now my wife does not want to entertain the idea of me flying another aircraft. I have to still work on her for that.
Well, start with a motorcycle, build your way up. Okay. What has been the biggest scary moment of failure of your life, and what did you learn from it?
What I've learned in general in life is that we start these companies, even they might be successful, and we take pride in that. But when you go through certain experiences in life, you realize that life is fragile, and all these things are good, but they're not the essence of who we are and why we are here. And that other things in life, your relationships with people, your family, are actually significant and very, very important. And, I'm not quite sure if that answers your question, but
it does.
But tragedies in life help put things in perspective. Things that you wouldn't learn otherwise. They help you clarify what's really important in life.
And I know you've had your own share of that. The importance of family does come through in relationships. Well said. We're going to move into a different kind of a question now. The biggest influence in your life, who was your role model? Did somebody help you create the vision for your life and help you move in a certain direction?
Yes. My father was the biggest influence in my life. Growing up, my father, who happens to be a physicist, growing up, we grew up with physics and Feynman lectures all around, even in high school and stuff. And I always wanted to do physics as a result. But when I went to college, my father said, "No, you're not doing physics. You grew up with physics. It's very important, but it's not the future, and you're not doing physics." And in retrospect, I'm glad he said that. I did engineering. It's hard to predict what life would have been had I done physics, but I'm not regretting the choices that I made. I did pretty okay with engineering, and I quite enjoyed it. My first love is still physics, and I still like physics. But my father had a substantial, knowing physics and learning physics had a lot to do with
systematic thinking.
Systematic thinking and my education in engineering as well. So he has had the biggest influence in my life.
Some rapid fire questions. I'm going to give you 2 words and just choose. What do you prefer, biryani or burger?
Biryani.
Okay. What is better, Hawaii or Paris for a vacation?
Well, if I have to take my wife's likes and dislikes into account, then obviously Paris.
Okay. But were you alone?
Probably Hawaii.
Okay. And what is better, a walk on the beach or a party in Times Square?
A walk on the beach.
Thank you. That helps us understand you a little bit better. My last question is, in 10 words, what is the brand Rajiv Laroia?
What my forte is invention and innovation. I see a problem, I want to solve it. The solution might require invention at a technical level and innovation at a big picture level. That's, I think, what I do and excel at.
Certainly at a billion people level, Rajiv. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sandeep.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You podcast. Be sure to visit tbcy.in to join the conversation, access show notes, and discover fantastic bonus content. You can follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Simply search for The Brand Called You. Thank you and see you next week.